We met at a bookstore, which should have been my first clue that the universe was playing tricks on me. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My friend had dragged me out for an errand, then bailed last minute, leaving me to wander the shelves of new fiction like a rom-com extra. I was reaching for the latest Sally Rooney when a hand bumped mine, and a voice said, "You go first." I looked up into the kind of face you only ever see in dating app ads. Straight white teeth, warm eyes, slightly overgrown curls like he didn't care too much about being hot, but just enough. He was wearing a dark turtleneck and smelled like sandalwood and ambition. "I wasn't going to fight you for it," I said, laughing nervously. "Well, now I'm insulted." "What if I wanted a good brawl?" he asked, and smiled like he had a secret. We got coffee. He asked about my job. I told him I was a social media manager. He said he was in digital wellness consulting. I nodded, pretending I understood. I didn't ask for details. I was too busy looking at the way his knuckles curled around his mug, like he was sculpted to be held. His name was Aaron. He said it like it should be obvious. And somehow, he got my number without it feeling like a pickup. By the time I walked out of that cafe, I was already mentally planning our third date. He seemed like someone who knew what he wanted, who made things happen. And honestly, that was hot. We texted for days, long paragraphs, voice notes, even memes. He asked good questions. He said goodnight with emojis. He told me I had a soul that feels like spring, which sounds like a red flag in hindsight, but at the time made my stomach do a backflip. He planned our first real date. Dinner at a rooftop restaurant I'd only ever scrolled past on Instagram. There were fairy lights. He wore a blazer. I wore lipstick that cost more than the Uber. It was everything I'd wanted from dating and never got. Until dessert. "I really admire how driven you are," he said, swirling the stem of his wine glass. "It's rare to meet women with that kind of energy." "Thanks," I said, flattered but cautious. "It's exactly the kind of thing we look for." I tilted my head. "We?" He leaned in. "I wasn't going to bring this up so soon, but honestly, the alignment here is wild. You could be so successful doing what I do." "Oh," I said, still unsure what that was. He smiled. "I mentor women like you. I help them take control of their time, their money, their energy. And I think you'd crush it." There was a pause. Then he added, like a bomb with a glitter bow, "Have you heard of Verdant Bloom?" I blinked. "The skincare thing? It's so much more than that." Of course it was. He explained. With passion. With graphs on his phone. With testimonials from a woman named Tiffany who quit her corporate job and now makes 6 figures from her laptop in Bali. I tried to look interested. I really did. But my lasagna turned cold while he talked about wellness leadership and reclaiming abundance and building generational wealth through community. I was on a date, and I was being pitched. I smiled politely. I nodded. I paid for my half and said I had to be up early. He hugged me tightly at the end. "Just think about it, okay? I only open spots in my team twice a year." I got into the Uber and said nothing until the driver asked if I was okay. I wasn't sure how to answer. Over the next week, he texted nonstop. Not in a flirty way. In a manager way. "Hey, just circling back on Verdant Bloom. I think you'd vibe so well with our team call on Sunday. Did you get a chance to watch the 12-minute intro video I sent? Super powerful. No pressure, but I do think this could change your life." I replied once vaguely. "Hey, thanks, just really swamped with work right now." He sent a voice note. "Totally get that. Just know, I don't think it's a coincidence we met. Some things are too aligned to ignore." Then came the stories. He tagged me in a screenshot of his earnings from the week, $3,500 in commission. Another story, a flat lay of turmeric supplements and something called Gut Joy. A boomerang of him high-fiving 2 blonde women over a laptop in a kitchen filled with neon motivational signs. It wasn't just a job. It was a cult aesthetic. I muted him. He didn't get the hint. 2 days later, I got a message. "I added you to the invite list for our Zoom mixer tomorrow. No pressure, but I'd love to see your face there." I left him on read. He sent me a follow-up video. "Hey, just wanted to check in. I hope I didn't come on too strong. It's just, I see so much potential in you." It wasn't romantic anymore. It was desperate. It was creepy. I ignored it. Then he found my LinkedIn. I got a connection request, followed by an endorsement for content strategy. Then a message. "You're seriously amazing at what you do. But what if you could do it for yourself? Imagine owning your own time." That night, I blocked him. On everything. A week passed. Then 2. And then I saw him. At a pop-up market downtown. He was at a booth, tablecloth with the Verdant Bloom logo, a ring light, mason jars filled with bath salts. He was demoing an oil diffuser for a woman in yoga pants. When he saw me, he smiled like we were old friends. I turned and walked the other way, faster than I meant to. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked. I never replied to him again. Marin apologized for things most people didn't notice. She said sorry when she sat down too quietly. Sorry for texting me too late at 9:45 p.m. Sorry for eating the last fry from our shared plate, even though I'd already offered it. I just don't want to be a burden, she'd whisper, curling into herself. I thought it was sweet, gentle. I thought she'd been through something rough. Maybe she had an ex who punished her for every tiny misstep. So I made it a point to reassure her. Told her, you don't have to be sorry. Ever. Looking back, I wonder if that's where it started. We met at a wine bar neither of us liked. Her friend bailed on her, my date ghosted. She was sitting at the counter, fiddling with her necklace. I ordered the cheapest glass they had and accidentally sat too close. She looked over and smiled like I'd walked out of a dream she'd forgotten. We started talking, and the night melted. She was shy but clever, with a voice so soft I had to lean in to catch half of what she said. She didn't make eye contact often, but when she did, it felt like a spell. We started dating a few days later. At first, she made me feel safe, like I couldn't mess up. Every time I did something wrong, forgot a plan, left my phone on silent, spaced out during a story, she'd say, "It's okay, I'm sorry I didn't communicate that better." She even apologized when I was late. I laughed about it with friends. Said I'd found the most understanding person alive. But somewhere along the way, her apologies changed. It started small. "I'm sorry you were upset last night," she said one morning. "I wasn't," I replied, confused. She smiled gently. "You were. You just didn't want to show it. Another time. I'm sorry I made you tell me not to talk about my parents." "I never said that." "You did," she said. "You just didn't use those words." I hesitated. I couldn't remember not saying it. But I couldn't remember saying it either. She looked so hurt, so certain. So I apologized. And that was the first time I said sorry for something I hadn't done. Over time, things got murky. She'd bring up things I didn't remember, arguments we never had, promises I didn't recall making. "You said you'd be there for my audition," she whispered once, tears brimming. "I waited an hour." Marin, I didn't know about it." "Yes, you did. We talked about it last Tuesday." I checked my phone. No messages. No mention of any audition. Still, I apologized. Because she looked like I'd broken her. And what kind of person breaks someone that fragile? Eventually, I stopped being sure of anything. I'd replay conversations in my head. Check old texts. Journal entries. Recordings even. But I could never find proof, just gaps. Blank spaces where her memory stood louder than mine. I started second-guessing everything. Did I really raise my voice that night? Did I actually forget her birthday? It wasn't for another month, was it? She kept apologizing too, endlessly like a looped prayer. "I'm sorry I remembered it wrong. I'm sorry you had to feel like the bad guy. I'm sorry I made you do this to me." The words came like rain, gentle, persistent, flooding everything. One night, I woke up sweating, heart racing. I'd had a dream. Marin was standing at the foot of my bed, whispering my name, over and over, each time more sorrowful than the last. I looked around. Empty room. I reached for my phone. There was a message from her. "I'm sorry if I woke you." I never heard the door open. I started pulling away. Stopped replying to every text. Took longer to answer calls. Gave vague excuses for why I couldn't come over. She noticed. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked. "I'm sorry." "You didn't. I just need space." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I just thought we were connected. You always said I could tell you anything." I didn't remember saying that, but I nodded. Then I found the notes. I'd gone to her apartment while she was out, just to grab my sweater. The drawer she always told me not to open was already cracked. Inside were stacks of paper, labeled, organized, conversations, arguments, moments of clarity, all meticulously dated, time-stamped, and written from her point of view. March 4th, he said he didn't want me talking to Rob anymore. I cried. He said I was being dramatic. March 17th, he forgot our anniversary dinner. I stayed quiet so he wouldn't feel bad. April 1st, he told me I'm not allowed to mention my parents again. Said it brings the mood down. None of it was true. I hadn't said any of those things. I know I hadn't. Had I? That night, I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. I just needed to remember things clearly, she said. You change your mind so often. Sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy. I stared at her. Marin, none of those things happened. She blinked. Yes, they did. I left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't explain. I blocked her number. Deleted our texts. Changed my locks. Spent weeks trying to scrub her from my life like a virus. But memory is a faulty archive. And guilt is a good editor. It didn't end there. I started receiving emails from her. Strange, long emails written like journal entries. I know you need time. I'm sorry. I'm working on myself. You were right to be mad. I shouldn't have made you feel like you had to lie. I forgive you, even if you won't forgive yourself. I never replied, but I read every one. Some part of me needed to. Then came the package. No return address. Inside, a binder. My name on the cover. Inside, new notes. Notes from after I left. He texted me goodnight at 2:04 a.m. I know he still thinks of me. He told me in a dream that he missed how I see him. He says sorry in his silence. I closed the binder and set it on fire. Watched it turn to ash in the bathtub. I moved cities. Got a new phone. New job. New everything. But still, on certain nights, I wake up at 2:04 a.m. with the memory of a voice whispering, "I'm sorry I made you forget who you are." And I start to wonder, did she dream me into the villain? Or did I dream her into the victim? Because the cruelest kind of ghost is the one that makes you doubt you were ever alive. Jenny liked my hair from the moment we met. Not in the way people usually say they like your hair. Not a compliment, not flirtation. She said it reverently. We met at a bookstore hosting a poetry reading. I was browsing the metaphysics shelf when she walked past, then turned back and stared at me. "Your hair is the color of smoke," she said. "It means you've survived something." I laughed. Thanks." She didn't laugh back, just smiled softly. It's rare to see someone whose spirit hasn't left their body yet. She handed me a book I hadn't noticed, Folklore of the Wound, and disappeared. Inside the cover, she'd scribbled her number. We went out that weekend. She wore long velvet sleeves, carried a satchel that jingled when she moved, and drank tea like she was divining the future in the steam. "I don't believe in accidents," she said during our second date. By the third, she kissed me and whispered, "I dreamed you before I met you." And I didn't run. Because Jenny was beautiful in that uncanny way. The kind of beautiful that makes you ignore the bells going off in your head. You don't fall in love with people like her. You slip. She started asking for small things. A button from a jacket. A thread from a scarf. The wrapper from a candy I'd chewed. "Just for my altar," she'd say with a playful smile. "Keeps the energy balanced." I thought it was eccentric. Artsy. Maybe even kind of sweet in a weird, witchy way. Then she asked for my hair. "I want a piece of you," she said, brushing her fingers through it. "Just a strand." I gave her one. She tied it with red thread and kissed it before slipping it into her pocket. Her apartment looked like a dream built on bones. Candles burned in every corner. The walls were covered in old mirrors and strange symbols I couldn't place. Bundles of herbs hung upside down from the ceiling. Books were stacked in uneven towers, all worn and thick with margins scribbled in black ink. I found a box once while looking for a charger. Inside, dozens of tied clumps of hair. Curled, looped, labeled. One had my name on it. Another said, Tomas, 2017. Another, Marie failed. I didn't say anything. Because I didn't know how to say, "What the hell is this?" The dream started after that. Vivid, strange. I'd wake up covered in sweat, unable to move for minutes. In them, I stood in a circle of candles, whispering words I didn't understand while something watched me from the shadows. I told her. She smiled. "That means the ritual is working." "What ritual?" I asked. She shrugged. "Don't worry. You're safe with me." I laughed it off. Told myself it was just her aesthetic. Just an identity. Just the things lonely girls do to feel in control. But things kept getting worse. I found carvings on the underside of my bed frame. Small symbols etched with something sharp. I asked Jenny about them. She didn't deny it. "They're protective," she said. "For your aura. You carved them into my furniture without asking." "I love you," she said, as if that explained everything. I started seeing her in my dreams, even when I was alone. Started feeling her fingers on my forehead before I fell asleep. Woke up one night to find her standing over me, whispering words I couldn't understand. "What are you doing?" I asked, heart pounding. Sealing the bond, she said, stroking my hair. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. I tried to pull away, told her I needed space, that I was overwhelmed. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just tilted her head and said, "But we're already connected." Then she left. That night, I found a wax figure on my doorstep. Small, pale, humanoid. It had my hair embedded into its scalp, and its chest was hollow. I didn't open it. I burned it, or tried to. It didn't catch fire, just melted slowly, smoked black, smelled like blood. The dreams worsened. I woke up with scratches down my back. I checked the cameras. Nothing there. I started hearing whispers in the walls. Felt something shift in my apartment at 3:33 a.m. every night. Lights flickered. Candles I hadn't lit would burn out on their own. I bought sage, salt, crosses. Nothing helped. I moved. But Jenine found me. She left a package outside my new place. Inside, a new wax figure. And a note. "This time, don't fight it. Let it finish." I called the police. They took a statement. Said they couldn't arrest someone for witchcraft and candles. They told me to block her. I did. She sent letters instead. Then drawings. Of me. Surrounded by flames. Eyes missing. One drawing showed me sleeping, a hand hovering over my chest. The hand had Jenine's ring. I stopped going outside. Quit my job. Cut off friends. My apartment became a cage. Then a chapel. I drew symbols on the walls myself, desperate to balance whatever she had done. I burned my own hair. I prayed to things I didn't believe in. But still the dreams came. One day, I woke up with dirt under my nails and candles burned down around my bed. I had no memory of lighting them. There was a voice in my head when I woke. Her voice. "You are becoming." I finally confronted her. Cornered her outside the same bookstore where we met. "You need to stop," I said. "I'm not yours. You don't get to do this." She just stared at me. "You gave me your hair," she said, almost sadly. "That means something." "No, it doesn't." She smiled. "It will." That night, I cut all my hair off. Burned it in the sink. Let it turn to smoke. And for a while, everything stopped. The dreams. The notes. The whispers. I thought maybe I was free. Until this morning. I found a figure on my porch. Bait. Eyes missing. Heart open. Inside the chest was a tiny scrap of paper. On it, in her writing, "I don't need your hair anymore. You're already mine." It was a late summer evening that made the whole city glow, the sun leaning low over rooftops and making even the cracked sidewalks look cinematic. I'd curled my hair, dabbed perfume on my wrists, and painted my mouth a shade called After Hours. I wasn't looking for forever, but I was open to whatever. His name was Adrian. We'd matched on that Sunday night, that twilight zone between lazy weekend and Monday dread, and the conversation had been electric. He was quick, not just in the way he typed, but in the way he seemed to read me, pulling little details from my profile and tossing them back like perfectly placed darts. His photos were, God, tall, sharp suit in one, bare-shouldered in another, sunlight spilling across his jawline in a third. He had suggested we meet at a wine bar downtown. Low lighting, good Merlot, best charcuterie board in the city. And I'd said yes before the sentence was over. I arrived a little early because anticipation is a kind of hunger, and I wanted to savor it. That's when the door opened, and everything I'd been imagining unraveled in a single breath. The man who stepped in was not the Adrian from my photos. Or maybe he was, if you squinted hard enough and ignored the fact that he looked 20 years older, shorter, softer around the edges. His skin had the deep-etched lines of someone who had lived every single one of those years. His hair was thinning in a way you can't Photoshop away, and the suit was replaced with an oversized hoodie and jeans that had clearly survived several oil stains. He saw me before I could pretend not to see him. His smile spread wide, too wide, and he walked toward me like this was exactly the moment he'd been expecting. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. "It's me. Better in person, right?" There was a pause, so heavy I could feel it in my teeth. I should have stood, right then and there. But instead, I heard myself saying, sure." The conversation started like any other date, if you ignored the screaming dissonance between the man in front of me and the man in my messages. He ordered a beer without asking what I wanted, downed half of it in 3 gulps, and launched into a story about his entrepreneurial journey, which mostly involved vague allusions to networking and hustle culture, and making moves that never seemed to land anywhere concrete. Every time I looked at him, my mind played this cruel split-screen game. On the left, the Adrian I'd swiped right on, crisp shirt sleeves rolled up, that smirk like he knew something you didn't. On the right, the man in front of me, leaning too far across the table, his breath thick with hops and something faintly sour, his gaze pinning me down in a way that felt less like interest and more like ownership. It was when he started telling me about how hot I looked in my profile that the unease tipped into something sharper. His compliments weren't really compliments, they were inventory, measurements, appraisals. He described my photos back to me, like he'd memorized them, lingering on details that made my skin crawl. The way my dress had clung in one picture, the glimpse of my thigh in another. And then he said it. I almost didn't swipe, he admitted, grinning. But then I saw you in person last week, at that coffee shop on 3rd. I was in the corner. You didn't notice me. The air between us seemed to thin. I replayed my week in my head, combing through every blurred face I'd passed, every shadow in the corner of a room. He'd been there, watching, before we'd even matched. I felt my pulse in my throat. My chair was suddenly too small. I think I should go, I said, my voice aiming for firm but landing closer to brittle. He laughed. Come on. I'm just saying it's fate. Meant to be. You'll see. Leaving should have been simple. Standing up, walking out the door, blocking his number. But that's not how these things work, not when you're a woman alone with a man who already feels entitled to your time. There's the calculation, instant and automatic. Will this escalate if I move too quickly? If I make him feel rejected? So I excused myself to the bathroom, phone in hand, fingers flying over a message to my friend. Call me. Emergency. Now. When I stepped back into the bar, my phone rang on cue. I put on my best face of feigned panic, murmured something about a sick roommate, and grabbed my coat. He stood as if to follow me, but I was already moving, weaving between tables toward the door. The night air hit me like a blessing. I kept walking fast, not looking back until I was 2 blocks away. I should have known the night was going to be a disaster the second he opened his mouth. Maybe it was the wine on an empty stomach, or maybe it was that stupid little hope I still carried around, the one that says, maybe this one will be different. But no, this one wasn't different. This one was spectacularly worse. We'd matched on Tinder 3 weeks earlier, and his name was Theo. Tall, good hair, a jawline you could hang laundry on, and that slightly smug, squint-a-smile guys get when they know they're good-looking. His profile was minimal, just foodie. Gym rat. Living my best life. But his photos were him in Paris, him on a yacht, him in front of some wine cellar that looked like a movie set. We'd messaged casually at first. He asked where I liked to eat in the city, and I told him about my favorite hole-in-the-wall ramen place. He immediately dismissed it. I don't really do casual dining. But I laughed it off. He said he knew this incredible new French-Italian fusion place, and that he'd take me there for our first date. When I showed up that night, I already felt underdressed. The place had chandeliers the size of small planets, tables spaced far enough apart for a presidential assassination, and servers gliding around like they were on invisible tracks. I'd worn a black dress and boots, classy, but not $300 A-plate classy. Theo was already at the table, phone in hand, scrolling with the kind of intense concentration people usually reserve for defusing bombs. He didn't look up until I was standing right there. You're late, he said, and I wasn't. I was on time. That was my first warning. I ignored it. The server came over, all smiles, offering to explain the specials, and that's when Theo's voice dropped into this tone I can only describe as entitled Yelp review. Actually, he said, looking her dead in the eye, I need you to tell the chef to redo the foie gras. I saw the guy at the next table get it, and it looked underseared. That's unacceptable for a place at this price point. I felt my stomach sink. The server nodded politely, but I could see the flicker in her eyes, that tiny flash of, oh, you're one of those. We ordered drinks, a ridiculously expensive red wine Theo insisted on, and he launched into a monologue about how he'd been burned by restaurants before. Apparently, his tragic backstory was that once a Michelin-starred chef had overcooked his steak. The appetizers came, and Theo took one bite before theatrically pushing his plate away. This is insulting, he said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. You call this carpaccio? This is freezer burn with garnish. By the time the entrees arrived, I was gripping my wine glass like it was the only thing tethering me to sanity. My pasta was heavenly, but Theo was in full performance mode, inspecting his food like he was searching for evidence in a murder trial. This is overcooked. I said al dente. This is like chewing on a tire. He waved over the server without hesitation. Take this back. I'm not paying for incompetence. I wanted to sink into the floor. The table behind us had gone quiet, probably enjoying the free dinner theater. Theo berated the poor woman for a solid 3 minutes, ending with, "And don't expect a tip if this isn't fixed immediately." I tried to change the subject, desperate to inject some normalcy into the evening, but he wasn't done. As the server walked away, he turned to me and said, "Honestly, service jobs are easy. I don't get why people can't just do their jobs. You agree, right?" That was my second warning. This time, I didn't ignore it. The night only got worse from there. Dessert? Ordered without asking me. And of course, it was the most expensive item on the menu. A chocolate souffle that took 30 minutes to prepare. While we waited, Theo scrolled through Instagram, showing me influencers he could totally date if he wanted to. When the check came, he didn't even glance at it before sliding it toward me. "I forgot my wallet," he said casually, sipping the last of the wine. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. "You're kidding," I said. "Nope. I mean, I paid last time," he replied, which was impressive considering there was no last time. "You've got this, right? You're a modern woman." My stomach twisted. The total was over $300. I could pay it. I had the money, but it was the smug expectation in his voice that made me want to hurl the souffle in his face. I paid. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted out, and because I didn't trust him not to make a scene if I refused. Outside, he had the nerve to go in for a kiss. I stepped back so fast I nearly fell off the curb. "Yeah, no," I said, turning toward the street. "Have a good life." He shrugged like he'd just been turned down for a free sample at Costco and walked the other way. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, I got a Venmo request from Theo for $50. The note said, "Gas money for driving to the date." I blocked him. Nico had the kind of beauty that felt cinematic. Dark curls, pale skin, eyes so blue they looked unreal, like someone had turned up the saturation just for him. He spoke in a soft, deliberate voice, like he was always narrating a novel. When we met, at a gallery opening I almost skipped, he was standing alone in front of a painting of a woman screaming into an empty hallway. "I like this one," he said without looking at me. "It feels honest." We talked for 3 hours after that. I left with his number, a fluttering feeling in my chest, and a belief that something important had just begun. He was perfect at first. The kind of attentive that made you feel like the world had paused just for you. He'd send thoughtful messages, poems, quotes, midnight thoughts. He remembered things no one else did. My favorite tea, the way I took my eggs, the childhood scar on my left wrist I never mentioned twice. We went on 5 dates in 10 days. I told myself it was magic. It felt like falling into a soft place. Warm. Safe. Unquestionable. Until it wasn't. The first red flag came wrapped in roses. I'd mentioned my favorite flowers once, in passing, blue violets. They reminded me of a book I loved as a kid. A week later, a bouquet showed up at my office. No note, but I knew who sent them. Sweet, right? But then it happened again. And again. Even when I didn't tell him where I was. A Sunday afternoon at the park with friends, blue violets appeared on the bench beside me. After a yoga class I'd never posted about, a single flower tucked beneath my windshield wiper. Still, I ignored it. Told myself he was just intuitive. Then he showed up outside my work. It was a Tuesday. I was walking to grab lunch when I saw him across the street, just standing there. No call. No text. Just watching me. I smiled and waved. He crossed the street and kissed me. "I missed you," he said. "We didn't plan anything today," I replied. "I know," he said. "But I had a feeling." The next day he showed up again. And the next. I told him I needed space during work hours. He apologized. Brought me a smoothie. Said he just wanted to surprise me. "It's romantic," he said. "You'll see." The turning point came one night when I posted a photo on my private story. Just a drink at a rooftop bar, no location tagged. 20 minutes later, he was there. "I figured it out," he said, smiling. "How?" He shrugged. "You posted a picture of that drink once before." I remembered the background. Traced the string lights. That night, I changed all my privacy settings. Made everything private. Told him gently that I needed boundaries. He smiled, then frowned. "I just want to see you," he whispered. "Why is that wrong?" I tried to pull away after that. Slower replies. Less availability. Polite deflection. He didn't take it well. He messaged more, called more, started sending long, looping texts about how much he cared, how afraid he was to lose me, how empty he felt without my voice. One night, he left a voicemail. "You make me real. Without you, I feel like static. Please don't let me disappear." Another night, "I know where you live. I would never hurt you. I just need to be close." I blocked him. Everywhere. Every platform. Every number. Then came the emails. He used burner accounts. Anonymous servers. Some were long and poetic. Others just said, "I'm still here." I came home one night and found a note slipped under my door. It said, "You looked beautiful sleeping." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the police. Filed a report. They were kind but non-committal. "No direct threats," they said. "Technically hasn't broken any laws. Keep records. Be careful." I bought blackout curtains. Changed the locks. Slept with pepper spray by my bed. My heart began to live in my throat. Then he vanished. No calls. No emails. No flowers. No shadow across the street. Weeks passed. Then months. I started to breathe again. I moved cities. Got a new job. Told myself I was safe. Started dating someone new. Someone kind. Quiet. Predictable. I never told him about Nico. Some stories feel like curses when you say them out loud. Then it happened again. I found blue violets on my porch. No note. Just the flowers, perfectly arranged. I froze. Stared at them like they were bleeding. It couldn't be him. He didn't know where I'd moved. I never told anyone. I took a picture. Deleted it. Threw the flowers in the trash. A week later, another bouquet. A different arrangement. Still violets. This time a small card. No writing. Just a single drawn eye. My phone started ringing again. Every Tuesday. 3:03 a.m. No caller ID. No sound on the other end. Just breathing. Steady. Familiar. I changed my number again. But the calls kept coming. New numbers. Same time. I stopped answering. But I couldn't stop knowing. I started seeing him in crowds. Once at the grocery store, his back turned, same curls. Once on a train platform, just the eyes staring. Always gone before I could be sure. But I knew. I moved again. This time across the country. New name on my mailbox. New routine. New life. But fear travels. And shadows are good at waiting. Last week, I found a package. No return address. Inside, a photo of me sleeping. Taken through a window. Blue violets on the windowsill. I moved again. But even now, every Tuesday, I still wake up at 3:03. Sometimes the phone doesn't ring. But I hear breathing anyway. Inside the house. Destina was the kind of person who made you feel lucky just for being near her. The first time I saw her, she was in line ahead of me at a food truck, balancing a phone on her shoulder, a coffee in one hand, and a tote bag sliding down her arm. She turned to me with this bright, exasperated grin and said, "If I drop dead, promise me you'll finish my falafel." I laughed. She winked. And somehow, 5 minutes later, we were eating together on the curb like old friends. By the end of that week, we'd had 3 more spontaneous meetups and 1 proper date. By the end of the second, I was falling. Destina was fire and velvet, charismatic, chaotic, and endlessly distracting. When she talked, she demanded the world's attention. She told stories like they were confessions. Her past was always just blurry enough to sound fascinating. She never asked for permission. She expected yes like the weather expects rain. And I gave them. All of them. At first. I planned her birthday dinner because she didn't believe in planning for herself. "It's more special when someone else cares," she'd said, twirling a piece of hair around her finger. "That way it means something." So I booked the table. A cozy little restaurant, intimate, fairy lights, candles on each table. I made the reservation for 6. She said that was perfect. Just close friends. I picked up the cake myself. Even got the flowers. Wore my best shirt. She was 35 minutes late. When she finally walked in, she wasn't alone. She wasn't even with 5 other people. She brought 17. 17 people. I counted. They flooded in like a wedding party. Loud. Laughing. Throwing their arms around her like they'd missed her for a decade. They took over half the restaurant. Tables were pulled together, chairs dragged across the floor, confused servers scrambling to adjust. I stood up, stunned, and Destina kissed me on the cheek. "You're amazing," she whispered, like I'd known all along. I didn't want to make a scene. So I smiled. I nodded at her friends, said hello, shook hands, sat down and let it all happen. They ordered everything. Wine, appetizers, a round of oysters, more wine, more plates. Someone asked for an off-menu dish, and the waiter just blinked and said they'd see what they could do. I sat there in the middle like a prop. Someone even asked if I was the event planner. I laughed. Too hard. Destina didn't sit beside me. She bounced between conversations, posed for pictures, clinked glasses, told stories that didn't include me. I caught her looking at me once. She gave a thumbs up and mouthed, "You're doing great." When the check came, it was slipped discreetly beside me. The waiter didn't ask. He just placed it in front of me like I'd already signed the contract. I didn't even look at it at first. Just stared at the little leather folder. My name on the reservation. My world tilting. Then I glanced at the number. I had to blink twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was almost $900. I swallowed hard. I looked around. No one was reaching for their wallets. Some were already standing, stretching, laughing, preparing to leave. Destina caught my eye, winked, then turned back to her conversation. I paid, with a shaky hand and a maxed out card. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the receipt on my nightstand like a blood-stained napkin. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she didn't realize. Maybe she thought we'd split it. Maybe. But no. The next morning, she posted a photo. Her, smiling at the table. Her friends laughing in the background. Candles glowing. Plates full. My chair was cropped out. The caption read, "Blessed to have people who always show up for me." I stared at it for a long time. No tag. No mention. I commented, "Glad you had a good time." She replied with a single heart emoji. Then she deleted the comment. I tried to talk to her about it. Told myself I needed closure. Or maybe just a refund. We met for coffee. She looked radiant, like nothing had happened. She thanked me again for being such a rock star, and said her friends loved the vibe. I said carefully, "You didn't tell me there'd be that many people." She blinked, sipped her latte. "I figured you could handle it. You didn't offer to help pay." She smiled. "You're the one who invited us." "Us?" She shrugged. "Don't twist it. I want to understand what that night was to you." "You're making this weird," she said softly. "It was a beautiful night. Why ruin it with numbers?" I didn't see her for a while after that. I tried to move on, forget the whole thing. But she didn't make it easy. A few weeks later, I ran into someone from the dinner. A woman named Freya, who'd sat beside me that night. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said. "I thought you moved." "I didn't." She smiled awkward. "Weird. Destina said you ghosted. That you blocked her." I blinked. "No, that's not what happened." "Yeah, she said you couldn't handle being with someone in the spotlight. That it intimidated you." My stomach dropped. What else did she say? Freya looked uncomfortable. That you got weird. Controlling. Didn't like sharing her. I left that conversation shaking. I tried messaging Destina. She left me on read. The next day she posted a tweet. "Some people can't love you unless they're the only one who matters. Their love comes with receipts." I became a punchline. A ghost boyfriend. The bitter ex who couldn't handle a queen. Every time I tried to defend myself, it looked worse. More desperate. So I stopped. But I started noticing something. It wasn't just me. A bartender I knew, he dated her briefly, told me she once brought him to a family dinner, then left him with a check after introducing him as her driver. Another guy said she'd used his credit to lease a car, just temporarily, then ghosted him before the second payment. There were patterns, but no one cared, because Destina was untouchable. She floated through lives like perfume, left people gasping and dizzy, then disappeared. Months passed. I still saw her now and then, on mutual friends' stories, at parties I avoided, always glowing, always loved. Then one night I got an envelope under my door. Inside was a photo of that dinner, uncropped. There I was, sitting at the edge of the table, shoulders tense, eyes hollow. A ghost at my own party. On the back, she'd written, "You'll always be part of something bigger than you." That night, I took the receipt from my drawer, folded it into a paper crane, and set it on fire. I watched it curl and vanish, and promised myself, never again. I met him on an app I'd downloaded as a joke. A friend had dared me to try dating again after a year of bad decisions, one-night stands, and a string of therapy appointments that all started the same way. I don't know why I picked these people. His name was Cal. His photos weren't just hot, they were cinematic. Moody lighting, soft smiles, perfect teeth that didn't look suspiciously bleached. One showed him leaning against a fence, a dog at his feet. Another, standing ankle-deep in a lake at sunset, shirtless and holding a fishing rod like some gentle lumberjack fantasy. And then the one that hooked me, him in a bookstore, sitting on the floor, glasses on, thumbing through the bell jar. "Okay, Sylvia Plath," I whispered to myself. "Let's see if you can disappoint me in person." I messaged first. He replied fast. Witty, warm. None of that hollow, performative energy most guys carried like cologne. He asked about my writing, not just my job. He told me his favorite poem was one he'd written but never shown anyone. He said he'd share it on our third date. Cute. Mysterious. Confident. He spoke in paragraphs, not emojis. No love bombing, no hey sexy. Just an actual person. It felt like a miracle. We talked for 2 weeks before he suggested dinner. A quiet spot in an old neighborhood. He picked the place, made the reservation. Already ahead of 90% of men I'd dated. He looked exactly like his pictures. Same tousled hair, same denim jacket. But more than that, he moved like a person used to being watched. Casual, self-assured, camera-aware. And the voice, deeper than expected, like late-night jazz radio. He kissed me on the cheek. Hello. I pretended not to swoon. Dinner was perfect. He asked questions. Remembered things I'd told him. Told stories that danced the line between charming and vulnerable. I ordered a second glass of wine, just to slow myself down. After, he walked me to my car and said, "I'd like to see you again. Unless you think I'm secretly a serial killer or something." I laughed. "You're way too pretty to be a serial killer." "I'll take that as a yes." We kissed. It was slow, warm, the kind of kiss that pulls at something low in your gut. I drove home floating. The second date was even better. Then the third. He read me the poem. It wasn't terrible. We slept together. He held me after, whispered things in the dark. I fell asleep curled into his chest like I hadn't done since college. It was after the fourth date that I noticed something weird. We were lying in bed. He was scrolling Instagram. I glanced over and saw a photo of me. A photo I didn't post. Not recent. Old. From my Facebook. A tagged pic at a Halloween party 3 years ago. I was in a fairy costume, wings crooked, drink in hand. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. He looked at me confused. "What? That photo? I don't have that on Insta." "Oh," he said, smiling. "You sent it to me." "No, I didn't." He didn't argue. Just set his phone down and kissed my shoulder. I let it go. Mostly. Later, I searched his profile for the photo. It wasn't there. Neither was anything else. In fact, I couldn't find his account at all. Maybe he'd changed his name. Maybe I was just bad at searching. But something itched at the base of my skull. I tried to shrug it off. Until the next week, when a woman DM'd me out of nowhere. "Hi. I know this is weird, but I think we're dating the same guy." I stared at her message for a long time before replying. She sent a screenshot. It was Cal, same smile, same photos. But his name was Mason, and his bio said he lived in Denver. He had messaged her a poem, the same one he read me. We compared notes. Timeline overlapped. So did the words he used. Down to the compliments. Down to the kissed me like he was memorizing the shape of my mouth. I felt sick. I confronted him that night. He denied nothing. "I'm not seeing her anymore," he said, voice calm. That was before we got serious. I hadn't known we were serious. I didn't remember that conversation. "But you used the same lines," I said. "The same poem." "I wrote it," he said. "It's mine. You gave it to both of us." I wanted to connect. Sometimes you recycle. Doesn't mean I meant it any less with you. I didn't know what to say. I left. He didn't stop me. That should have been the end. But I wasn't done. I started looking. Digging. Reverse image search. Reddit. Forum posts. A burner account on a dating subreddit had flagged a man with Cal's photos. Different name, different city. Comments about him being a fantasy boyfriend. Too perfect to be real. More women reached out. 6 total. Every one of them thought they were the only one. Same lines. Same compliments. Same poem. In some photos, his hair was longer. In some, he had a dog. One woman swore she met him at a coffee shop in Seattle. Another said she'd FaceTimed him every day for a month. One had sent him money. I couldn't find any record of the real Cal. No tagged photos. No high school Facebook friends. No LinkedIn. Just a string of curated images and stories that vanished as soon as you tried to verify them. I thought about how warm his chest felt under my cheek, the way he smelled, the rhythm of his breathing when he slept. I thought about how none of it might be real. I blocked his number, then unblocked it, then blocked it again. It was a perfect afternoon, the kind of Saturday where the breeze smelled like roasted almonds and sunscreen, and everyone looked like they were starring in a commercial for casual happiness. I was walking through the promenade with Liam, a guy I'd been seeing for just under a month. Tall, floppy-haired, wore mismatched socks on purpose. He had that slightly chaotic artist energy, unpredictable, confident in weird ways, and exactly the kind of man you flirt with when you're not quite ready for anything serious, but bored enough to make bad decisions. We'd met at a poetry night where he read something about crows and capitalism. I rolled my eyes and slept with him a week later. This was our third date. Casual. He'd texted me, "Let's wander." I said yes. I wore denim shorts and a white linen top. He wore a paint-splattered button-up and cowboy boots he claimed were ironic. The plan was to walk, maybe get ice cream, people watch. No stress. Just vibes. We were strolling down the crowded street, weaving through tourists and buskers, when I realized he was getting twitchy. His eyes flicked toward something ahead of us, and he started walking faster, muttering, "Oh man, I love this guy." Up ahead was a street performer. The usual sort, portable speaker, fedora on the ground, looping pedal setup. He was playing a reggae cover of Billie Eilish. I could already tell I was too sober for this. Liam practically skipped toward him. "Yo, this guy's a genius," he said. "I've seen him do Radiohead as Samba." I offered a polite nod and hoped we'd keep moving. But Liam didn't keep moving. He stood there, bobbing his head like he was in a trance, then before I could stop him, he dropped his canvas tote and jumped in front of the crowd like he was crashing a TED Talk. At first, I thought he was joking. Just doing a little dance, a wink-wink, make the girl laugh kind of thing. But then he actually grabbed the mic stand. No one stopped him. The musician, mid-loop, smiled like this happened often and stepped aside. And then Liam started to sing. No, not sing. Croon. Like some drunk jazz poet who'd found God in a Whole Foods aisle. Off-key, eyes closed, hips swaying like he was making love to the ghost of John Mayer. The crowd didn't know whether to clap or cringe. I stood frozen, mouth slightly open, praying for a sinkhole to open under me. "Oh my God," I muttered. "Oh my God." He made eye contact with me and winked. Winked. As if this was foreplay. People had stopped to film. Not just watch, film. A girl next to me whispered, "Is that her boyfriend?" "I don't know that man," I said. "I've never seen him before in my life." It didn't stop. One song turned into another, then a rap verse, then an interpretive body roll that looked like he was trying to exorcise a demon from his spine. He performed like someone whose entire personality was a dare. Then came the clapping. Not for him, no, not at him. Just around him, like the crowd wasn't sure what else to do. Polite confusion. One guy handed him $1. Another said, "Okay, that's enough, bro." But Liam didn't stop. He started beatboxing. It was the worst beatboxing I've ever heard. Like two squirrels fighting in a blender. I turned and walked away. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make eye contact. I just turned slowly, like a woman who had seen something she couldn't unsee, and drifted toward a coffee shop like I was escaping a cult. He followed me 5 minutes later, beaming. "Did you see that? I killed it." I blinked. "You hijacked a man's street set and made him your backing track," I said. "It's called collaborating." "No, Liam. It's called hijacking." He laughed. "You're embarrassed." "Of course I'm embarrassed," I hissed. "You sang an acoustic mashup of WAP and Leonard Cohen." A baby started crying. He didn't get it. Not even a little. "It's performance art." "No, it's a cry for help." He pouted like a toddler denied dessert. "You're too uptight." I stared at him, this gangly man-child with too many rings and not enough self-awareness, and realized I was seeing him clearly for the first time. The chaos wasn't charming anymore. It was exhausting. "I think I'm gonna head home," I said, reaching for my phone. "Alone?" He looked genuinely confused. "But we were gonna get tacos." "You were gonna get tacos," I said. I was gonna pretend this day didn't happen. That was the last time I saw Liam. But not the last time I heard him. 2 weeks later, I was tagged in a video on TikTok. Someone had uploaded "Street Performer Gets Interrupted by Drunk Dude," and there he was, Liam, beatboxing with one hand in the air, shirt half unbuttoned, humping the air like it owed him money. The caption said, "She walked away." Smart girl. It had over 60,000 likes. The comments were brutal. I didn't delete my account. I left the video up, let it live. I knew I'd made a mistake the moment I stepped out of the Uber. The guy didn't even try to hide it. He glanced at me, up, down, and then all the way up again like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. I was in a floor-length black satin dress, slid up to the thigh, backless, with a halter neckline that took 3 YouTube tutorials and a prayer to tie correctly. He was wearing a Lakers hoodie and jeans. "I thought you said this was a bar?" I said, not even pretending to mask the disbelief. He smiled, boyishly confident. "Yeah, it is. This is it." It was not. It was a shack with neon beer signs in the windows and a patio made out of uneven planks. From across the street, it looked like the kind of place where your shoes stick to the floor and someone gets kicked out nightly for arguing about darts. "This is like a dive bar," I said, lowering my voice so the bouncer wouldn't hear. "Yeah," he shrugged. "But it's a fun dive. I come here all the time." I wanted to laugh. I also wanted to call another Uber and peel out of there immediately. But instead, I forced a smile and adjusted the hem of my dress as it dragged against the concrete like a damn wedding train. Inside, it was worse. No lighting, unless you count the red glow of a vintage jukebox. 2 pool tables. A long wooden bar with scratches and carvings like it had survived at least one axe murder. Every guy in there looked like he'd just gotten off a shift roofing a house. I walked in like a walking Oscar statue, and they all noticed. One guy actually whistled. "Kill me." He led me to the bar like everything was fine, like I wasn't sweating bullets while trying to not trip on my own gown. I sat stiffly on the bar stool while he ordered drinks, a beer for him and whatever she's having, which earned me a suspicious glance from the bartender. "Martini," I said, and I swear the guy smirked like he'd just watched someone order caviar at a McDonald's. Jake, that was his name, handed me the drink and leaned in, all charm and obliviousness. "So you clean up nice," he said, eyes scanning the dress like it had personally offended him. "I thought we were going somewhere upscale," I said through a tight smile. He blinked. "I never said that. You said you had a reservation." "Oh," he chuckled. "That's just what I call dibs on the corner booth." I wanted to scream. Instead, I sipped my martini like I hadn't just dressed for a gala and ended up in a horror-themed garage. We sat in the booth, and I tried to make conversation while pretending I didn't feel like I was auditioning for a role I didn't understand. He was charming, sure. In the same way a drunk Labrador is charming, loud, messy, and unaware of personal space. Every story ended in a high five. Every sentence included the word bro. At one point, he spilled his beer. Not on me, thankfully, but it splashed under the table, and I had to lift the hem of my dress so it wouldn't soak through. That's when he saw the slit and raised his eyebrows like he'd just discovered I had legs. "I mean, damn," he said, too loud. "You really went all out, huh?" I didn't respond. I just stared at the floor and wished I had invisibility powers. Then the karaoke started. Not by me. God, no. But by someone in the back who thought they were Adele, singing Rolling in the Deep like they were rolling in something dead. The whole bar clapped. Jake whistled and banged his beer on the table. "You want to do a duet?" he asked. "Not even if you paid me," I said. He laughed and ordered another round. By that point, I wasn't even trying to fake a good time. I was scanning the room for exits, thinking about how far I'd have to walk to find a second date who'd at least give me a warning before emotionally strip-mining me in public. And then came the final humiliation. I stood up to go to the bathroom, a brave move considering the heels I was in and the fact that the floor was permanently sticky, and as I walked, I felt it. The unmistakable slip of the halter strap. Then the second one. Both sides loosened at once. I froze mid-step, clutching my chest as the top of the dress dropped halfway down my ribcage. Not fully exposed, but enough to draw a gasp from a group of women playing darts. Someone cheered. I heard clapping. One of the bartenders rang a bell like it was happy hour. I darted into the bathroom and stood in front of the cracked mirror, face burning. The straps had come untied. Apparently, I hadn't knotted them well enough, and gravity had taken its revenge. I retied them with shaking hands and stared at myself. What the hell was I doing here? I looked like I was going to a Met Gala that had been rerouted through a garbage dump. The lipstick, the heels, the hair I'd spent an hour curling, all of it felt absurd now, like armor in a battle no one else was fighting. When I walked out of the bathroom, Jake was at the bar doing shots with a man named Dusty, who had face tattoos and was wearing a t-shirt that said MILF Hunter. I walked right past them. "Hey, where you going?" he called. "Home," I said without stopping. He caught up with me outside, jogging after me like I was the one being unreasonable. "You're really leaving? You brought me to a dive bar in a prom dress. It's not my fault you overdressed. You didn't say where we were going." I said a bar. "You said reservations, Jake." He threw his hands up. "Whatever. You looked hot. I thought you'd like to show off." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing to say to that. Nothing worth saying, anyway. He turned and stomped back inside, muttering something about me being dramatic. I stood on the sidewalk, dress dragging in a puddle, mascara smudged, trying not to cry. An Uber pulled up, and I got in without a word. The driver said nothing the whole ride home, but when I got out, he looked at me in the rearview mirror and said, "Rough night?" I nodded. I got home, peeled the dress off, tossed the heels in the corner, and sat on my bathroom floor eating leftover dumplings with my hands. Jake texted me 2 days later, "No hard feelings. You just gotta learn to loosen up." I blocked him. Months later, someone mentioned that bar at work, and I laughed so hard I snorted water through my nose. They asked what was so funny, and I just shook my head and said, "You really had to be there." The first time I met Elric, he was carrying a tarantula on his shoulder. Not in a cage. Not in a box. Just casually perched there like a brooch made of nightmare. We were at a friend of a friend's art show. One of those warehouse gallery pop-ups with flickering fluorescent lights and experimental jazz humming from a dusty speaker. I was drinking cheap wine out of a plastic cup when Elric appeared beside me, a living Halloween prop clinging to his hoodie. I flinched. He didn't. "She's friendly," he said. "Her name's Matilda." I nodded, trying to hide my panic. "Cool. Super cool. Love spiders." He smiled. "No, you don't. But I like that you tried." That was Elric. Observant. Odd. And way too charming for someone who kept live reptiles in his bedroom. We started dating a week later. At first, his weirdness felt like mystery. He had a terrarium in every room, lizards, snakes, insects. He talked to them like they were roommates. He'd whisper to his boa constrictor while cooking, recite poetry to his bearded dragon while folding laundry. "Elric the Enchanter," I called him once. He just smiled and said, "Animals are honest." That's all. He wasn't wrong. He was gentle, in an eccentric way. Open but unreadable. When he looked at you, it was like he was peering through a keyhole into your soul. He made you feel chosen. Known. We dated for 2 months before things began to shift. Tiny things at first. He insisted on keeping all the windows closed, even during heat waves. Said the lizards liked it that way. He labeled everything in his apartment, drawers, plates, even chairs. "Helps with alignment," he told me. "Prevents energy slippage." I rolled with it. Everyone has quirks, right? Then came the spider. It happened late one night. I'd stayed over. We were in bed watching some black and white horror flick from the 60s. Elric fell asleep, his head on my lap. I got up to grab water. I didn't see her. Matilda. She must have been crawling across the rug. I felt the crunch before I saw her. A horrible, delicate pop beneath my heel. I froze. Looked down. She wasn't squished completely, just broken. Still twitching. I screamed. Elric sat up instantly. "What was that?" I couldn't answer. Just pointed. He walked over, knelt beside what was left of Matilda. Picked her up with both hands like she was a child. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He whispered she was 16. Then he looked at me. "You'll have to bury her." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He handed me a small shoebox lined with tissue paper and moss. Inside, Matilda, her legs carefully tucked, her body posed like she was sleeping. "I already made it," he said, "for when the time came." He led me out to the backyard behind his apartment. Gave me a tiny, ornate trowel. Told me where to dig. The hole had to be 5 inches deep. No more. No less. I did it. He read a eulogy. Quoted some poem about decay and the cycles of life. We stood in silence afterward for what felt like a full minute. He didn't hold me. He didn't thank me. He just said, "Matilda was always afraid of being forgotten. You helped her pass with dignity." That night, I couldn't sleep. Things got stranger after the funeral. Elric's rules multiplied. He asked me to wear socks at all times indoors, said it disturbed the floor spirits otherwise. He reorganized his bookshelf so that all the spines faced the wall. "They don't like being watched," he said. He made me sit in the same spot on the couch every time I visited. Told me the cushions were memory mapped and could sense disruption. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself he was just sensitive. Artistic, maybe grieving in his own way. But the house began to feel less like a home and more like a shrine. Then I found the second shoebox. It was a rainy Sunday. Elric was out running errands. I stayed behind to work on a freelance piece. Got cold. Went searching for a blanket in the hall closet. That's when I saw it. On the top shelf. Black ribbon tied around it, just like Matilda's. I pulled it down. Inside was empty, except for a name written on the lid. My name, in Elric's handwriting. I froze. Stared at it for a full minute, trying to make sense of it. Was it a joke? A gesture? Some kind of symbolic thing? When Elric came home, I asked him. He didn't deny it. Didn't smile. It's for when you leave me, he said softly. What? I prepare. That's all. I laughed nervously. Elric, that's creepy. You can't make a coffin box for me just because we're dating. It's not a coffin, he said. It's a container. For memory. For grief. I don't like forgetting. I told him it made me uncomfortable. He just nodded. Most truth does. After that, the house began to close in around me. I found notes tucked in my bags. Inside my shoes. Tiny slips of paper with phrases like, please don't vanish. Some things shouldn't be left behind. Stay soft. Stay here. I stopped staying the night. He noticed. One evening, he invited me over for something special. I considered saying no, but guilt gnawed at me. So I said yes. He cooked dinner, beat pasta of course, blood red, and lit candles all over the apartment. No lights. Just flames and shadows. Everything felt deliberate. He handed me a gift. Another shoebox. I hesitated, heart pounding. Open it, he said. Inside was a glass orb. Inside the orb, suspended like a scene from a snow globe, a tiny model of me. Hair, clothes, expression, all accurate. It was too perfect. Too detailed. I made it, he said. From memory. And hair. I dropped the box. He didn't flinch. I don't want to be remembered like this, I said. He blinked slowly. But it's how you are. I left that night. Didn't say goodbye. Changed my number 2 days later. But Elric didn't chase me. Not directly. Instead, I started receiving letters. Each one postmarked with no return address. The envelopes lined with pressed flowers. Inside, drawings. Me sleeping. Me crying. Me holding Matilda's box. He drew me like I was a saint in mourning. Each drawing was signed. E. Archivist of the Dead. I moved cities. New apartment. New friends. New job. But sometimes when I check my mailbox, I still find packages. Shoeboxes. Always empty. Always tied with black ribbon. I never open them anymore. I just know. I met Stellara on a Tuesday that smelled like wet pavement and burnt espresso. It was one of those gray afternoons where the clouds felt heavy enough to fall, and I was waiting in line at a small bookstore cafe that I'd never been to before. I was distracted, scrolling through my phone, half-heartedly eyeing the scones, when someone tapped my shoulder. You've got good taste in sad poetry, a voice said, melodic and sharp with curiosity. I turned, and there she was. Slender, pale, with a soft edge to her smile and eyes that didn't blink as often as they should have. She pointed to the book I had tucked under my arm, Nocturnes for the Broken, a collection of grief-soaked verses I'd bought during a rough patch. I laughed. Guess I'm feeling dramatic. So am I. She smiled again, a slow curl of her lips. Want to sit together? It was so casual. Too easy. But her presence was magnetic, like she walked in the world a few inches off the ground, and being near her felt like gravity bending toward beauty. So I said yes. We sat. We talked. For 4 straight hours. Her name was Stellara. She had once been a cellist, classically trained, had even toured with a small European ensemble. But a long, unnamed illness had ended her performing career. Now she taught piano to children, she called them her tiny stars, and wrote poetry she never shared. She loved the moon but hated the word lunar. Said it sounded cold. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she talked, like each word was a verse. The way she watched me, as if I were more important than the world around us. By Friday, we were seeing each other every day. It escalated fast, but I didn't mind. Stellara brought a kind of intensity one hadn't realized I craved. She texted me long paragraphs, philosophical questions, strange dreams, sad childhood memories. When we were together, she was always close, leaning on my shoulder, playing with the cuff of my sleeve, speaking in a tone that hovered between poetry and pleading. She said things like, Isn't it weird how quickly we become each other's homes? You feel like the last chapter in a book I've read before. At first, it felt romantic, deep, like she was peeling back layers no one else had touched. But then it started to feel too much. She cried when I didn't answer a text right away, apologized for no reason, then accused me of pulling away. She'd stare at me sometimes with a strange sadness and say, "I just hope you don't leave before it's time." I chalked it up to trauma, to passion. I told myself I could handle it. Then, on the 13th day of knowing her, she told me she was dying. We were in my apartment, on the floor beside the couch, drinking cheap wine and listening to a scratched record she'd brought. "My kidneys are failing," she said, so casually I almost didn't hear her. "What?" She repeated it. "They're shutting down. It's genetic. Complicated. I'm not eligible for the transplant list." I froze. "Jesus, Stellara. I didn't know. I'm telling you now." She sipped her wine. "There's a workaround. A directed donor. Someone healthy. Compatible. Someone who loves me." She looked up, her gaze clear and heavy. I knew what she meant. "Stell," I said carefully, "we've only known each other for 2 weeks." Her expression didn't change. Not a flicker. "I know," she said. "I understand." She left shortly after. Said she was tired. She didn't kiss me goodbye. The next morning, my phone was a war zone. Dozens of texts. Missed calls. Emails. Social media notifications piling in like a flood. The first message read, "You monster. I hope she lives long enough to forget you." Another, "It takes a special kind of evil to let someone you love die." Confused, heart pounding, I opened Instagram. And there it was. A post from Stellara. A photo of her in a hospital bed. Tubes in her arm. Her face pale but lit from within, like martyrdom made flesh. The caption read, "He could have saved me, but he chose not to. Some people only love when it's easy." She tagged me. The comments were a funeral of my reputation. Name and shame. This guy's heartless. Imagine being given a chance to be a hero and choosing to be a ghost. This is emotional homicide. Some were from strangers. Some from people I vaguely knew. Friends of friends. College classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. I tried to defend myself, at first. Tried to explain. But each reply was twisted, mocked, dismissed. So I deleted my accounts. All of them. Vanished from the digital world like a ghost. But it didn't stop there. A week later, flyers started appearing. Posted on street lamps near my building. Taped to cafe windows. Left under windshield wipers. Always the same design. A photo of Stellara. The quote from her post. My full name printed underneath in bold. Then the voicemail came. Blocked number. 2:17 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, I heard a single sentence whispered like a curse. Your kidney could have saved her. Then a breath. A click. Silence. I moved apartments. Changed my phone number. Told my boss I was taking a mental health leave. But none of it helped. Once a month, without fail, I received a new letter. No return address. Inside, an organ donor form. Blank. Just waiting for my name. The first one I tore up. The second I burned. The third, I left untouched on my kitchen counter for 3 days. By the 6th, I stopped opening them. But still I kept them. In a box under my bed. I tried to date again. Just once. It went well for a while. But then she Googled me. Her tone changed after that. Said she didn't feel safe. That she trusted survivors. She didn't elaborate. She just left. Months passed. I tried therapy. Group sessions. Meditation. I read books about toxic relationships and victim complexes and internet mob psychology. I told myself none of it was my fault. That I was the one who was used. But sometimes at night, when the wind whistled wrong and my chest felt tight, I thought, maybe I should have said yes. Not because I owed her my body, but because guilt rots slower than grief. Then came the book. I walked into a new bookstore trying to reclaim something, normalcy maybe, peace. And there, on the display table, was a lavender hardcover with no author listed. Just the title. He chose not to. My skin crawled. I opened it. Read the first page. He told me he'd be there. But when I needed him most, he disappeared. He said he wasn't ready. But I was ready to die. I closed it. Looked around like I'd been caught. I bought it. I don't know why. At home, I read it in one sitting. It was her. It had to be. She changed the names, the dates, the cities. But every page bled with our history, rewritten in her favor. I wasn't just the boy who said no. I was the boy who walked away from her grave. I didn't sleep. I paced, drank too much, looked her up again anonymously. She was everywhere now. Podcasts, panels, college talks, advocate for invisible illnesses, voice for the medically betrayed, a woman who knows what it means to be left. I found a video of her TEDx talk. She spoke with elegance, pain, fire. Sometimes the ones who kill you don't lift a finger. They just refuse to reach out. The crowd cried. I wanted to throw something through my screen. One night, a new voicemail came. This time, she spoke. Hey, it's been a while. Just wanted you to know. I'm okay. I've found alternatives. You weren't the only one, after all. A pause. I never really needed your kidney. Just your guilt. Another pause. It lasts longer. Then a click. The next day, another form arrived. But this one was different. It was already filled out. My name. My signature. Perfectly forged. I called the police. Showed them everything. They shrugged. She hasn't made a threat, one officer said. This is weird, sure. But technically it's legal. What about the forged signature? Could be a prank. I walked out feeling like a character in someone else's horror story. One I couldn't rewrite. I met Nura in late spring, when the city was suffocating under wet heat, and everything felt like it might bloom or rot. She was standing outside a closed flower shop, peering through the glass as if she could will it to open. Her sundress fluttered slightly in the breeze, though there was no breeze to feel. Her skin had a pale, unbothered glow, and she wore a small locket in the shape of a seed pod around her neck. I missed it by 10 minutes, she said as I passed her. What were you hoping to get? Something alive, she said, eyes still fixed to the window. A new voice for my garden. It was such an odd response that I smiled. She didn't look at me at first, but when she did, her gaze landed with weight, as if she'd just decided something. You should come see it sometime. I laughed awkwardly. Your garden? She nodded. We exchanged numbers beneath a flowering dogwood tree. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what she said either. Only that she looked like something half-grown and entirely dangerous. Nura lived on the top floor of a brownstone wrapped in ivy, in a neighborhood that smelled like hot concrete and too many secrets. Her apartment had no television, no artwork, no mirrors, just plants, everywhere. Vines trailed from the ceiling like veins. Potted flowers bloomed in every corner. Moss grew along the windowsills. A single twisted tree curled out of a broken ceramic tub in the middle of the living room. The air inside was thick, sweet, almost wet. She saw me looking and smiled. Each one has a name, she said. I asked if she'd always loved plants. She tilted her head. They loved me first. We started dating that week. At least, I think we did. She never asked, never declared anything. She simply appeared in my life. A new constant, a new rule. She rarely left her apartment. Said the garden didn't like being alone. But she always invited me over. And each time I came, she asked questions. Deep questions. Intimate questions. Things no one had asked me since I was a child in therapy. What do you regret most from when you were 13? Have you ever broken something on purpose just to feel in control? Whose name do you still say when you're dreaming? Sometimes, she whispered my answers into the petals of her orchids. Other times, she murmured them while trimming vines. When I asked her why, she said, "They grow best when they know who you are." Over time, the plants began to change. New blossoms bloomed, ones I'd never seen before. Unusual colors. Veined petals. Some glowed faintly in the dark. A lily-like flower in the kitchen started curling toward me when I entered. The moss on the bathroom floor became spongier, darker. It sighed when I stepped on it. I told myself it was just atmosphere, that Nura had created a living environment so immersive it tricked the senses, like walking into a dream someone else was having. But the changes in me were harder to explain. I began losing energy, slowly at first, just a little more tired, a little more distracted. But soon I started forgetting things. Words would vanish mid-sentence. I'd leave keys in the fridge. Missed calls. Sleep through alarms. I had bruises on my arms that I didn't remember getting. Pale purple half-moons along my thighs and shoulders. Nura noticed. She touched one gently and said, "You're adjusting." To what? The rhythm. When I didn't respond, she stroked my cheek and said, "The garden takes what it needs, but only from those it trusts." I stopped inviting her to my place. She never came anyway. When I suggested we go out for dinner, she frowned, as if the idea offended her. Out there is too loud, she said. It hurts them. She meant the plants. That was the first time I considered leaving. The next morning, I woke up in her apartment with no memory of arriving. There was dirt under my fingernails. A red smear on my ankle like a root had brushed me in the night. I asked her what happened. She looked at me, expression unreadable, and said, "Sometimes you come when you're needed. The garden remembers." I began documenting everything. Photos, voice memos, journal entries. One morning, I listened to a recording I had taken while sleeping. There were whispers. Nura's voice, soft and low. The heart opens best when it's left alone in the dark. Breathe in. Let go. You are mine, and they are yours. Grow. I went to her place less and less. Each time I stayed away, she sent me gifts. Not texts. Not emails. Living gifts. A potted plant would show up outside my door, or a single flower in a glass bottle. Always vibrant. Always reaching. The petals would move, just slightly, as if tracking my breath. Once, I threw one out. It was waiting at my front door the next morning. Inside. No sign of how it had gotten in. Its leaves were curled. Hurt. I decided to end it. I went to her apartment. Prepared a speech. Told myself I'd be firm. She opened the door before I knocked. As if she'd known. I understand, she said before I spoke a word. You feel drained. Frightened. I don't know who I am anymore. She reached out, gently touched the center of my chest. But they do, she whispered. She stepped aside, and I saw it. In the center of the room, a new flower. Dark red. Almost black. It was shaped like a mouth, blooming open. Inside the petals, something pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. A small tag hung from its pot. It had my name. I ran. Didn't look back. Blocked her number. Burned the plants she'd given me. Switched apartments. Tried to forget, but I still dream of vines wrapping around my limbs, of petals whispering in my ears, of soil sliding into my mouth. One morning, I woke to find a mark on my shoulder, a perfect imprint of a leaf I'd never seen before. 2 nights later, I woke up on the floor of my bedroom. The soles of my feet were stained green. There was dirt on my sheets. Last week, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a new plant. Small. In a pot shaped like a skull. The petals were the exact color of my birthmark. Attached was a note. In her handwriting. You're blooming beautifully. I'm so proud. Sometimes, I catch my reflection in the mirror and swear my skin looks different. Fresher. Translucent. Sometimes I hear my name spoken in rustling leaves. Sometimes I sleep for hours and wake up with soil in my teeth. I think she meant it when she said I'd never leave. Not while her garden is still growing. And not while it remembers my name. We'd gone out 3 times before I agreed to go to his place. Ben was different. Not flashy, not overly polished, but interesting. The kind of guy who'd tell you about a hike in the middle of nowhere like it was the most magical thing in the world, or describe a recipe from memory while he cooked it in front of you. He had this quiet confidence that felt refreshing after a string of dates with people who treated conversation like a performance. Our first date had been a brewery tour, easy casual, no pressure. The second was a late-night diner run after we both left work too late for a real dinner. The third was an art exhibit, where he walked me through each installation like he knew the artist personally. He didn't text constantly, which I liked, but when he did, the messages were thoughtful. By the 4th date, it felt natural to accept when he invited me to his place for dinner. He said he lived just outside the city, in a house that had been in his family for decades. The drive was longer than I expected, winding out past the suburbs into rural stretches where the streetlights grew scarce and the dark pressed in around the edges. When I pulled into his driveway, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No hum of traffic, no distant sirens, just the sound of my tires crunching on gravel and the faint rustle of trees in the wind. His house was small, wooden, and set back from the road, with an old porch that creaked when I stepped onto it. Ben opened the door before I could knock. "You made it," he said, smiling. "Come in." The inside was warm, cozy even. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic, and a small fire crackled in the living room fireplace. He poured me a glass of wine, and we talked while he finished cooking, roast chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. It was perfect. After dinner, he suggested we sit outside for a bit. The night air was cool, and the stars overhead looked impossibly bright without the city's haze. He brought out blankets, and we sat on the porch swing, sipping wine and listening to the sound of the woods. It was sometime after my second glass that I heard it, a faint, high-pitched sound coming from somewhere beyond the trees. It was quick, almost swallowed by the wind, but sharp enough to make my ears twitch toward it. Ben didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. "Do you get a lot of wildlife out here?" I asked. He glanced toward the tree line. "Sometimes. Foxes, coyotes, raccoons." His tone was casual, but his eyes stayed on the dark beyond the yard for a beat too long. We went back inside, and he made coffee while I used the bathroom. On my way back down the hall, I passed a door that was slightly ajar. I wouldn't have noticed anything if the smell hadn't hit me first, metallic and raw, like iron left out in the rain. I paused, my hand hovering over the doorframe. The light inside was dim, but I could make out shapes, shelves lined with jars, something large covered with a tarp in the center of the room, and on the far wall, a series of hooks that glinted faintly in the low light. Before I could look any closer, Ben's voice came from the kitchen. "You okay?" I stepped back quickly, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Yeah, just got turned around." Back in the kitchen, he handed me my coffee and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I said sure, but my mind kept circling back to that room, to the smell, to the faint sound I'd heard outside. Halfway through the movie, I realized he wasn't really watching. His gaze kept drifting toward the window, toward the dark outside. At one point, he got up, muttered something about checking the firewood, and stepped out onto the porch. I watched him through the glass, the way he scanned the yard, the way his shoulders were tense. When he came back in, he smiled like nothing was wrong, but I'd already decided I wasn't staying late. I made some excuse about an early morning and started gathering my things. He walked me to my car, and just as I was about to get in, that sound came again, sharper this time, closer. My head turned toward the trees. Ben's hand landed on my shoulder. "Don't worry about it," he said quietly. "It's nothing." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I drove away with my windows up and my doors locked, the darkness swallowing the road behind me. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched his name online. It took a while, but I found it, a local news article from years back. Something about his grandfather, a well-known figure in local hunting circles, being investigated for illegal animal killings. No charges had stuck. I didn't call Ben again. He didn't call me either. But sometimes late at night, I think about that room, the jars, the tarp, the hooks. And I wonder if the sound I heard in the woods was just a fox, or something else entirely. Me and Luke matched on Hinge, and from the first message, there was this current. Not the dull, polite kind where you trade safe facts about favorite restaurants and mutual hate for pineapple on pizza, but the kind where you lose track of time mid-conversation. Our chats stretched from lazy mid-morning coffee breaks to 2 a.m. half-asleep voice notes. He was funny in a dry, almost British way, even though he'd grown up in Queens. He'd quote films I loved without making it a contest, remember tiny details I mentioned in passing, and text me photos of the street food stalls he'd stumble across when walking home late. His profile said self-employed in logistics, which I didn't question. The guy seemed to always have money, always have time, and always be willing to spend both on me. The first date was sushi in the West Village, followed by whiskey at a hidden bar with no sign outside. He was magnetic, the kind of man who knew the bartender's name, asked yours like it mattered, and made you feel like the night was a secret just between the two of you. The second date was a rooftop in Brooklyn, him handing me a glass of wine while the city lights blinked on like fireflies. The third was a movie at his place, a brownstone apartment that looked like it belonged in a lifestyle magazine. Big windows, exposed brick, art on the walls that I could tell wasn't from IKEA. By the fourth date, we'd settled into something easy and hot, the tension between us so thick you could cut it with a knife. He'd touch my back in that way that's half guide, half claim, and I'd lean into him just enough to let him know I wanted more. He never pushed, not in the gross way, but the way his eyes would linger made it clear where we were headed. The night it happened, I was already halfway gone from the wine before I even rang his doorbell. He opened it in a black t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, smelling faintly of cedar and something darker I couldn't name. His hair was damp, like he'd just stepped out of the shower, and when he leaned in to kiss my cheek, his lips brushed just close enough to mine to make my pulse stumble. We started on the couch, music low, a candle burning on the coffee table. He poured me a drink, sat close enough that our knees touched, and let the conversation drift. Work. Childhood stories. Travel. I'd never been so comfortable in someone's space so quickly. His place didn't feel staged, it felt lived in, like he'd curated it for himself, not to impress anyone. Somewhere between my second glass of wine and the way he laughed when I told him about my worst high school haircut, his hand slid to my thigh. I didn't stop him. In fact, I leaned closer, my own hand brushing his chest, feeling the heat through his shirt. The kiss was slow at first, then deep enough to make my head spin. He tasted like whiskey and mint, and when he pulled me into his lap, I didn't even think to hesitate. That's when it happened. The sound was so loud I thought something had exploded, a violent crack of wood splintering, followed by shouting. The front door burst open like it had been hit with a battering ram. Before I could even register what was happening, the room filled with men in black tactical gear, their voices overlapping in a sharp, practiced rhythm. Police! Hands where we can see them. Now! Luke's entire body went still under me. His hands, which had been tangled in my hair seconds ago, went slowly up into the air. I scrambled off his lap, heart hammering so hard it hurt, my wine glass tipping over and spilling across the rug. The nearest officer barked for me to get against the wall. My voice came out in a stutter. What is this? What's happening? Nobody answered me. Two of them moved in on Luke, pulling his arms behind his back with brutal efficiency. One of them started reading him his rights. I stared, my brain trying to catch up with the scene in front of me, my body still frozen like a deer in headlights. Luke Hayes, you're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute controlled substances, trafficking, and evading arrest, the officer said, like it was just another Tuesday. My eyes whipped to Luke's face. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed on some point in the distance, like if he didn't look at me, I wouldn't exist. What the hell? My voice cracked, half fury, half disbelief. Are you serious? He didn't answer. I watched as they searched his apartment, pulling open drawers, flipping over couch cushions. One of them pulled a black duffel bag from under the bed and unzipped it, revealing stacks of cash bound with rubber bands and plastic-wrapped packages I didn't need to ask about. My stomach lurched. One of the officers came over to me, took my ID, and asked how I knew him. My mouth was dry as paper. We've been dating, I managed. I had no idea. They believed me, I think. Or maybe they didn't care. They took my statement, asked me to step outside while they finished clearing the place. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and metallic, smelling faintly of rain. When they brought Luke out in handcuffs, his eyes finally met mine. There was no apology in them, no shame. Just this strange, almost regretful softness, like he wished we'd had more time before it all fell apart. I watched as they put him in the back of a police car and drove away, the red and blue lights painting the wet street in pulsing color. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, replaying every moment of every date, searching for the thing I'd missed. The way he'd always paid in cash. The fact that his phone seemed to buzz constantly, but he never checked it in front of me. The vague logistics job. The brownstone that was way too nice for someone without a visible 9-to-5. It all made sense now. For weeks after, I kept expecting him to text, even though I knew he couldn't. I half wondered if he'd planned to tell me one day, in some twisted show of trust. Or maybe I was just another name on a list, someone he liked enough to keep around until things got too hot. I stopped dating for a while after that. It wasn't that I thought every man I met was secretly a drug dealer. It was that I didn't trust myself not to miss the signs again. We met at a bar on a Thursday night. He was already there when I arrived, leaning on the bar with a beer in hand, wearing a plain gray t-shirt and that easy smile people practice in mirrors. "Hey," he said when I walked up. His voice had that gravelly edge like he'd been up too late the night before. We grabbed a table near the back, and the conversation flowed in that unremarkable but pleasant way first dates sometimes do. Work, family, random stories about bad landlords and weird travel mishaps. He had a quick wit, and when he leaned forward to tell me something, his eyes locked on mine in a way that made me feel like I was the only thing he was focused on. After the second round of drinks, he asked if I wanted to keep the night going. I hesitated, but he was charming enough, and I wasn't ready to go home yet. "We could go back to mine," he offered. "I've got good whiskey." The apartment was on the second floor of an old brick building that smelled faintly of rain-soaked wood. He unlocked the door and stepped aside for me to go in first. It was a nice place, clean but lived in, with warm lighting and a record player spinning something low and bluesy in the corner. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, heading to the kitchen. I wandered into the living room, running my fingers along the spines of the books on the shelf, glancing at the framed photos on the wall. Most were landscapes, a few with friends, and one of them with a woman. Close enough to look intimate, but casual enough that I didn't assume anything. He came back with 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one, our fingers brushing. We sat on the couch, the music low, talking about nothing and everything. The whiskey was smooth, warming me from the inside out. That's when I heard it. A door creaking open down the hallway. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward us. I turned my head just as she appeared, a woman maybe my age, wearing leggings and an oversized hoodie, her hair piled in a messy bun. She stopped in the doorway, eyes flicking between us with the kind of flat, unreadable expression you get when you've already decided how you feel about someone. "Oh," she said. "You didn't say you were bringing someone over." I froze, glass halfway to my lips. "Hi," I managed, trying to keep my voice neutral. "This is," he started, then paused, glancing at me. She filled in the silence for him. "I'm Claire. I live here." The words landed heavy in the air. I looked at him, waiting for an explanation. "Yeah," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Claire's my ex. We broke up a while ago, but, the lease." I blinked. "You live together." "It's just temporary," he said quickly. "We're not together. It's just convenient right now." Claire snorted softly, walking past us to the kitchen. "Convenient. Right." Something in her tone made the hairs on my arms stand up. He reached for my hand, like that would smooth things over. "It's fine. We've got boundaries. She does her thing, I do mine." I forced a smile, but my brain was already spinning. Who brings a date home when their ex still lives there? Claire came back with a glass of water, leaning against the wall. "So, are you staying over?" she asked me, her tone perfectly casual but her eyes sharp. No," I said quickly. "That's probably smart," she said, taking a sip of her water. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. I set my glass down and stood. "Actually, I should get going." He frowned. "Already? We were just—" "Yeah, it's late," I cut in. He walked me to the door, offering half-hearted protests, but I could feel Claire's eyes on my back the whole way. Outside, the night air felt like freedom. I didn't look back. The next day, he texted me like nothing was wrong, asking if I wanted to hang out again. I told him no. He pushed, saying I'd misread the situation. I didn't respond. But for days after, I couldn't stop replaying that moment when she appeared in the doorway, the way her eyes went straight through me. And I wondered if maybe I hadn't misread anything at all. Maybe I'd walked in on a story I was never supposed to see. This date started with a grope. Okay, not a full grope, but close enough that my brain immediately filed it under personal space violations. I'd barely stepped through the door of the bar when he swept me into what I can only describe as a hug designed by someone who had studied body contact like it was a competitive sport. His name was Eric. We'd matched on Bumble, exchanged maybe 20 messages, the kind of small talk that's just enough to feel like you're not meeting a total stranger. He'd been funny in a way that made me curious, confident in a way that made me cautious, and we'd agreed to meet for drinks. The bar was one of those dimly lit hipster joints with Edison bulbs and cocktails that came in mason jars. I liked it instantly. It was the sort of place where you could talk without shouting, where the air smelled faintly of citrus and gin instead of stale beer. And there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, with a grin so wide it made my cheeks ache in sympathy. "Hey you," he said like we were old friends, then came in for that hug. Not just a hug, though. His hands landed firmly on my lower back and stayed there a beat too long, pressing me in. I laughed awkwardly, pulling away. "Nice to finally meet you," I said, the way people say it when they're hoping the weird first impression is just nerves. We found a booth near the back, and he slid in right beside me instead of across the table. "Easier to hear you this way," he said, even though the music was barely louder than a whisper. The first drink went down quickly, mine because I needed something to do with my hands, his because he seemed determined to match me sip for sip. As we talked, I realized he had a way of leaning in so close that I could see the flecks of color in his eyes and feel the heat of his thigh pressed against mine. At first, I tried to adjust subtly, shift an inch away, cross my legs the other direction, but he seemed to treat each movement like an invitation to close the gap again. Every time he laughed, his hand landed somewhere on me, my knee, my shoulder, the small of my back. At one point, when I mentioned having a rough week at work, he reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, the kind of intimate gesture that only feels good when you actually want it. I didn't. I started cataloging his touches the way you count raindrops on a window, trying to figure out if I was imagining the pattern. I wasn't. His hand stayed on me more than it didn't. The conversation was fine. Forgettable. He talked about his job in real estate, his CrossFit routine, his crazy ex who apparently didn't appreciate affection. I nodded along, but I could feel my body slowly curling inward, like I was trying to make myself smaller. When he suggested ordering food, I told him I wasn't hungry. "Come on, just some fries," he insisted, brushing his fingers along my arm like the touch itself might convince me. I shook my head, forced a smile. "I'm good, really." He didn't drop it. "You're so tense," he said suddenly, squeezing my shoulder. "Relax. I'm not gonna bite." The thing was, I didn't believe him. I lasted another 20 minutes before I told him I had to get going. He frowned like I'd just told him his dog died. "Already? We're having such a good time." I slid out of the booth, putting the table between us. "Yeah, but it's getting late. Early morning tomorrow." He stood too, and before I could step back, he pulled me in for another hug, tighter this time, both arms locking me in place. His mouth was near my ear when he said, "We should do this again. I can tell we've got chemistry." I peeled myself away, muttering something non-committal, and made for the door. I didn't breathe easily until I was halfway down the block. On the subway ride home, I replayed every touch, every time I'd laughed politely instead of saying, "Stop." The truth is, I'd been raised to smooth over discomfort, to avoid confrontation, to protect men's feelings before my own boundaries. And he'd counted on that, maybe not consciously, but instinctively, the way people test how far they can push without resistance. I blocked him that night. And yet, for days afterward, I found myself glancing over my shoulder when walking home, half expecting him to appear out of the crowd, grinning, ready to close the distance between us again. It's strange how a single evening can make you hyper-aware of your own skin, how it can turn the simple act of sitting next to someone into something you can't stop remembering in sharp, uncomfortable flashes. It was raining the night I met him. I'd almost canceled. The weather was grim, my week had been long, and I'd been stood up once already that month by someone who texted "sorry LOL" 3 hours later, as if that fixed anything. But there was something about his messages, short, clever, like he was always halfway out the door to somewhere interesting, that made me think it would be worth showing up. His name was Matthew. On Tinder, his photos were casual but curated. Him on a mountain trail, him with a golden retriever, him in front of a food truck at night, smiling like he'd just been told a secret. The conversation had been easy. We'd traded favorite books, swapped travel horror stories, and agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. I got there first, ordered a cappuccino, and picked a table by the window so I could watch for him coming in. He arrived exactly on time, hair damp from the rain, a navy jacket darkened at the shoulders. In person, he looked like his photos but sharpened somehow, his eyes a little brighter, his smile a little more deliberate. We shook hands, his grip warm and lingering, and sat down. The first few minutes were textbook first date. Small talk about work, where we grew up, how we ended up in the city. But there was something about the way he looked at me. Not the casual glance you give someone when they're talking, but an unbroken, unblinking focus, as though he were memorizing my face one detail at a time. I told myself it was just attentiveness, a rare thing these days, but my fingers kept circling the edge of my coffee cup like they were looking for a way out. Then came the questions. What street do you live on? Do you live alone? Where's your office? Which subway stop is closest? He asked them like they were part of a normal conversation, weaving them between questions about my favorite films and whether I liked spicy food. I gave vague answers, changing the subject when I could, but he had a way of circling back, rephrasing until he thought he'd gotten what he wanted. 30 minutes in, I knew I wouldn't see him again. 40 minutes in, I was looking for a polite exit. I told him I had plans to meet friends, gathered my coat, and stood up. He insisted on walking me out, lingering in the doorway as I opened my umbrella. When he hugged me goodbye, his arms locked around me like I might try to escape mid-embrace. He whispered, "I'll see you soon," like it was a certainty. I blocked him on Tinder that night. 3 days later, I saw him again, or rather, I saw his car. I recognized it from the coffee shop parking lot. Black, dented near the back wheel, the kind of car that looks like it's been holding on to too many miles. It was parked across from my apartment building. At first, I thought it was coincidence, maybe even paranoia. But when I left for work, I glanced across the street and saw him sitting in the driver's seat, his hands resting perfectly still on the steering wheel, watching my building. I didn't sleep well that night. Over the next week, his car began appearing in other places. Outside my office, near the grocery store. Once, when I was meeting a friend for dinner, it passed slowly by the restaurant, Matthew in the driver's seat, eyes fixed straight ahead. I stopped walking home the same way twice, varied my grocery shopping times, but he still turned up like he had some private map of my life. The first time he approached me after that, it was morning, early enough that the air still felt damp with the memory of night. I was in line for coffee when I heard his voice behind me. Didn't think I'd run into you here. I turned, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Matthew. Hi. Small city, I guess. He stepped closer, too close, and the line shifted around us uncomfortably. We should talk, he said, his hand closing around my wrist like a clamp. The contact was sudden and hot, and I tried to pull away, but his grip only loosened when the barista called out for the next customer and told him to move along. That was the day I went to the police. They took my statement, nodded, asked if I had any proof. Without texts or threats or photos, they said there wasn't much they could do, not until he crossed a more concrete line. I left the station feeling smaller than when I'd walked in. The line came a week later, in the middle of the night. I woke to a faint, persistent sound at my bedroom window, a soft, deliberate scratching. My apartment is on the second floor, so the sound alone didn't make sense. Hard in my throat, I pushed back the curtain just enough to see. He was there. Matthew's face was pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouth curved into a smile that didn't match anything human. My scream tore through the dark, and he was gone before I could reach for my phone. When the police arrived, they didn't tell me I was imagining things. They sent a patrol car to circle the block for the next few nights, but I still couldn't bring myself to sleep there. I packed a bag and moved in with my brother. He's a construction foreman with the kind of build that makes people reconsider their decisions, and for a few days I felt safer. But safety is a fragile thing. Matthew found my brother's address within a week. He started leaving notes on the windshield of my brother's truck, things like "you can't hide" and "we need to talk." The handwriting was neat, almost careful, as if the message itself wasn't meant to be threatening, only the fact that he could deliver it to me anywhere. My brother was furious, pacing the living room like a caged animal. When another note appeared one night, just the words soon written in black marker, he grabbed his jacket and keys. "I'm finding him," he said. I tried to stop him, but he was already out the door. Those were the longest 2 hours of my life. When he came back, his knuckles were raw, his lips split, but his eyes were steady. "It's handled," he said, and wouldn't tell me more. That night, the watching stopped. The car didn't reappear. The notes stopped coming. I met Jordan on a Monday. You're not supposed to meet someone magnetic on a Monday. Mondays are for withered leftovers and mild existential crises. But there he was, sitting in a corner of the coffee shop I used as my escape pod from real life. Navy jacket, gray sweatpants, and a notebook he was pretending to write in. He looked like a man who never had to rehearse charm. That soft kind of masculinity that smells like tobacco and cinnamon and the illusion of being fixed. I sat near him because I liked the tension of pretending not to stare. When he caught me, he smiled like we'd already shared a secret. "Careful," he said. "You're starting to look familiar." I laughed, sharp and instinctive. "That's a terrible line." "Is it?" he asked. "It got you to talk to me." We didn't talk long. 15 minutes, tops. He was waiting for a ride. I was avoiding an inbox full of adult responsibilities. But there was something easy about him. Casual without being lazy. Confident without being loud. He wrote his number on a napkin. I held it like a dare. 3 days later, we got drinks. I don't even remember what I wore, which is how I know I liked him. When you're busy calculating your exit strategy before the first sip of wine, you memorize your outfit like armor. But with him, I just showed up. He was already there. Same jacket. Same smirk. He stood when I arrived, old school, unexpected, and kissed me on the cheek like he was claiming real estate. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other in a past life. He asked good questions. Deep ones, not just flirty banter. I told him about my sister's insomnia and my fear of mold, and the fact that I cry during car commercials if they involve dogs. He listened without the polite nod of someone waiting for their turn to talk. He said he worked in logistics. I didn't press. I never do when the chemistry is good. By the end of the night, I was towing the line between dizzy and certain. He walked me to my car, hands in pockets, shoulders relaxed. He asked if he could kiss me. Just like that. No pressure. Just permission. The kiss was slow. Focused. like he'd been planning it for hours. I drove home feeling the outline of his mouth on mine. The next few weeks were a blur of long texts, phone calls that lasted until my earbuds died, and late-night visits that turned into tangled mornings. He didn't always sleep over, but when he did, he left quietly before sunrise. Said he didn't like feeling in the way. Something about that should have felt off. But I liked the space, the illusion of intimacy without the suffocation. And besides, I didn't want to ruin it by asking too many questions. He didn't have social media. Said he'd deleted it after a breakup. I didn't pry. He paid in cash. Drove a car that was too nice for a logistics job. Wore cologne that smelled expensive and sad. I didn't ask. I just leaned harder into the fantasy. Then one night, I showed up at his place unannounced. Not for a dramatic reason. I'd just gotten off work early and wanted to surprise him. Bring dinner, maybe stay the night. I texted when I was downstairs, and when he didn't reply, I buzzed anyway. He opened the door wearing a white t-shirt and the look of someone who'd been interrupted mid-alibi. "Hey," I said, holding up the takeout bag. "Thought I'd feed you." He paused, then stepped aside. "You always this sweet to guys you barely know." I wouldn't call 3 weeks barely. His place was cleaner than I expected. Sparse. Like someone had just moved in or was planning to move out. The furniture didn't match, and the walls were too bare. But it smelled like him, warm and masculine, with a trace of laundry detergent and something faintly chemical. We ate in front of the TV. He put on an NBA game. I didn't care about basketball, but I liked watching the way he tensed during free throws, how he muttered at the refs like they owed him money. It made him seem ordinary, human. The game ended badly. His team lost in overtime. He threw the remote at the floor, not hard, but sharp enough to make me flinch. I made a joke to lighten the air, but he didn't laugh. Just stood up, stretched, and asked if I wanted to stay over. We had sex. It felt different that time. Quieter. Less generous. I stayed anyway. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. I rolled out of bed quietly, slipped on his shirt. The door to the hall was open just a crack. There were 2 men standing by the fridge. One of them was Jordan. The other, I'd never seen before. Stockier. Tattooed hands. Tense shoulders. They weren't arguing, but they weren't chatting either. I heard one phrase clear as a bell. "She doesn't need to know." And Jordan's reply, "I'm handling it." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, he acted normal. Kissed me on the forehead. Offered coffee. Said he had errands to run. I left without asking questions. But they were boiling inside me. Later that week, I looked him up again. Properly this time. His name, his job, his plates. Nothing came up. No LinkedIn. No articles. No online paper trail. He didn't exist. I called him that night. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Who was that guy at your place the other night?" Silence. "You were up?" he asked. You didn't answer the question. Another pause. Then, "He's someone from before. Old friend." "Before what?" "Before turned out to mean before prison." He told me everything in the slow, careful tone of a man reciting an alibi for the 100th time. Yes, he'd been to prison. 3 years. Conspiracy to distribute. No violence. No weapons. Just the wrong people and the wrong hustle. He said he got out 6 months ago. Said he'd changed. Said the guy in the kitchen was his cellmate best friend, recently released. I was stunned. Not because I hadn't suspected something, I had. But because he said it so plainly, like we were talking about a missed dentist appointment. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "But I liked the way you looked at me when you didn't know." I didn't know what to say. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Just said he understood if I didn't want to keep seeing him. I hung up. But I didn't block him. Instead, I spiraled. For days, I replayed every moment. Every kiss. Every silence. Every time he'd shown up unannounced or disappeared for a day without explanation. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me missed him so much I could barely eat. He texted 2 days later, "Still thinking about your laugh. Hope you're okay." I replied, "You lied to me." He wrote, "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole story." That was worse somehow. And yet, I saw him again. We met at a park in the middle of the day. Public. Neutral. I wanted to look into his eyes and decide for myself. He was nervous. Not panicked. Just small in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me more. Said the drug thing was about survival. Said he ran errands for the wrong people because he owed money. Said he never hurt anyone. And I believed him. Or I wanted to. He didn't ask me to stay. He just said he liked who he was when he was with me. I should have walked away. Instead, I reached for his hand. We dated for another 3 weeks. Everything felt borrowed: time, space, safety. Then one night, we were watching TV when someone knocked at the door. Not a knock, really. A bang. Before I could react, the door burst open. Cops. Guns drawn. Hands up. Get on the ground. Now. They weren't here for me. They were here for Jordan. Turns out, he hadn't just been in prison. He'd escaped supervision. When I think back to my early 20s, I sometimes reflect on how naive I was. I was living in Albany, New York, fresh out of college, working my first full-time job as a junior designer for an ad agency. Life was unpredictable and exciting, and I was eager to meet new people. This particular story is one that I don't usually tell unless someone insists on hearing the worst date I've ever had. It's long, strange, and left me with a lesson I wouldn't fully grasp until years later. It was the summer of 2003, a hot and humid time in upstate New York. I had met a woman named Tara through a mutual friend who worked in the HR department of my office. She was described as quirky but sweet, and I was told she had a cute laugh and a small dog she adored. I had just ended a short-lived relationship, so I figured, why not? Our first few phone conversations were light and pleasant. She had a soothing voice and often giggled at my jokes, even the bad ones. We arranged a dinner date for the following Saturday. Tara lived in a modest apartment complex just off Lark Street, above a small cafe that smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. I arrived around 6:30 p.m., parked my car in front of the deli next door, and walked up the steps leading to her unit. The door was already open when I got there, which was the first red flag I chose to ignore. Her apartment door stood slightly ajar, and I could hear the scuffle of tiny paws echoing through the hallway. A little brown dog, possibly a miniature pinscher or a Chihuahua mix, darted past me, its leash trailing behind like a ribbon. I instinctively bent down and scooped the little dog up, gently cradling it in my arms. Just then, Tara's voice called out from inside the apartment. "Oh, you must be my date. How are you?" She emerged from the doorway with a frazzled expression, her hair tied in a messy ponytail and her tank top slightly stained. She smiled briefly, then added, "Can you take Charlie out? He hasn't had his walk yet, and I need a minute to get ready." Caught off guard, I hesitated. Was this some kind of test? A quirky icebreaker? Either way, I nodded politely and took Charlie outside. As I walked him down the street, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been cast in a role I hadn't prepared for. I was supposed to be her date, yet here I was, walking her dog before even saying hello properly. The dog, at least, was cute and well-behaved. He sniffed around, did his business near a lamppost, and wagged his tail as we made our way back to the building. Back upstairs, Tara was still scrambling around. Her hair was now brushed, but she seemed even more frantic. She thanked me for walking Charlie and quickly locked the door behind her, only to realize she had forgotten her phone and purse. She unlocked the door, dashed inside, and then locked it again after retrieving her things. We finally started walking to my car, but the entire time, she kept muttering under her breath about how chaotic her day had been. As we approached my car, she stopped abruptly and said, "You know what? I'm feeling really anxious. I don't think I can go out to dinner tonight. Can we just go to your place and chill for a bit?" I blinked. Was this really happening? I hesitated. I didn't want to be rude or dismissive, but something about this already felt off. Sure, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "We can do that if it makes you feel better." My apartment was about 20 minutes away in the Pine Hills neighborhood. I lived with my college buddy, Drew, who was thankfully out of town visiting family that weekend. The drive was quiet, punctuated only by Tara talking about her ex-husband, her landlord, and how she was going through a transformative period. I didn't say much. I just nodded and occasionally threw in a wow, or that sounds rough. In my mind, I was replaying the events of the evening so far. I had barely said 5 words before becoming a dog walker, a listener, and now, a host. I didn't know what this woman wanted, but it didn't feel like a date anymore. Still, I was young and curious, and part of me wanted to see where this would go. Back at my place, Tara immediately made herself at home. She placed her purse on the coffee table, kicked off her sandals, and plopped down on the couch like she had done it 100 times before. She let out a long sigh, the type that sounded like she'd been holding her breath all day. I turned on the TV and asked if she wanted something to drink. She shook her head and pulled her knees up to her chest. "This week has been hell. she began, her voice cracking just slightly. "I found out my ex is getting remarried. My landlord is kicking me out because his niece needs a place to stay. And my dog is sick. I had to take him to the vet twice this week." I listened sympathetically, but deep down I felt uneasy. Her eyes were distant, and while she spoke with a sarcastic laugh, her story was anything but funny. She talked about her ex being a successful software engineer who used to pay for everything. According to her, she had sacrificed her own career to support him emotionally, and now he had moved on, leaving her with nothing. About 15 minutes into our conversation, her phone rang. Tara jumped up to answer it and walked into the hallway. Her voice became hushed and tense, and although I couldn't hear the entire conversation, bits and pieces floated into the living room. "What do you mean I need to be out by Monday?" she asked, raising her voice slightly. "I thought we agreed on the 15th. "No, I don't have anywhere else to go right now." When she returned, her expression was strained. "That was my landlord," she said. "He's being a total jerk. I might be homeless next week." She looked at me with wide eyes, and I knew what was coming next. She didn't say the words outright, but her expression said it all. "Help me. Offer to let me stay here." I didn't take the bait. I nodded empathetically, but didn't open that door. The atmosphere had shifted. I no longer felt like a guest on a date. I felt like a pawn in someone else's crisis. She continued talking, this time about how her last boyfriend had a perfect life, and how she missed the stability. The way she described him, it sounded like she had treated him as a lifeline rather than a partner. That's when I realized she might be doing the same thing to me. I decided I needed to end this. I told her my roommate would be back in half an hour and that we had plans. I also offered, falsely, to help her move and even said I'd send her some money to help her get back on her feet. It wasn't the truth, but it was the only way I could get her to leave without confrontation. She agreed reluctantly, and I guided her down the stairs, back to my car. On the drive back to her apartment, she kept talking about how hard her life had been lately and how she just needed someone who cared. I didn't say much. I was counting the minutes until I could drop her off.